Hey everyone, welcome to this week's show. I'm super excited about this project. If you are like me and you go to lots of sporting events or concerts or things like that, you're probably very familiar with needing a clear bag to take into venues. And so I thought it would be really fun to whip up a simple one that we can make all on our own. So let me show you what you're going to need to make one of your very own. First up, you're going to pick 3/4 of a yard, and that's going to be your binding edge and the bottom of your bag. You're also going to need 1 yard of clear vinyl, 1 yard of fusible fleece, and 1 package of purse strapping that is at least 2 yards. All right, so for today's bag, I'm using this beautiful turquoise color, and you can see that this turquoise strapping matches our fabric perfectly. There's also lots of other color straps available, so be sure to check that out. And if you want to pair these with a print, it would be awesome and look great, but I just wanted to keep it nice and clean and simple, so be sure to check out all of the colors that are available to you. And to begin, I'm just going to go ahead and open up this package of my strapping. And since I know I have exactly 2 yards and I need to make 2 handles, we can begin by putting this directly in half, lining up our ends, and we're just going to cut this in half so it's ready to go. So there, I've got that ready. I can grab my scissors and we can just make a cut so that my 2 equal pieces are ready when I get to that point, and I can just set this aside for now. All right, so let's talk a little bit about cutting. So from your fabric, you're going to want to cut 4 9 by 18 inch rectangles and 2 2.5 inch strips by the width of fabric. From your vinyl, you're going to cut 2 10 by 18 inch rectangles and 1 6 by 8 inch pocket rectangle. From the fusible fleece, you're going to cut 2 9 by 18 inch rectangles. So now that you have all of your pieces cut, I've gone ahead and set those here. And then let me show you how to assemble this because it's really quite simple. We're going to start by making our pocket, and so you can see here I've got this little binded edge along the top so that it's not just, you know, raw vinyl there. So let's take care of this. This is that 6 by 8 inch piece of vinyl that I've cut out, and I have a 2.5 inch strip. I just cut a little chunk a little bit larger than my pocket itself, and we're going to fold this in half just like we would traditional binding and press it in half. Just like so. And then we're going to line this up with the edge of our vinyl. And because the vinyl can sometimes shift, I like to give myself a little extra on either end, and I also found that it's much easier to work with if I put my fabric down towards the feed dogs as opposed to the vinyl itself. It just likes to go through the machine better. I also recommend not using pins because the pins are going to pierce through the vinyl, but you can use like Wonder Clips or a product like that works great for this project. So let's just go ahead and put this under the needle. I am using white thread just because I want to make sure you guys can see it, but if I weren't teaching it on camera, I would for sure use a coordinating thread that kind of disappears. So let's go ahead and sew a 1/4 inch seam, and I just want to keep my vinyl lined up and take my time. I can cut my thread, and then you don't want to press this vinyl, obviously, because it is, you know, plastic and it will melt to your iron. So we're just going to finger press with our fingers to roll that back, and we're going to pull it around. Another thing you want to keep in mind when you're working with the vinyl itself is you want to check your stitch length. You don't want it to be too small because you are actually perforating that vinyl every time you stitch, and it could end up tearing. So you want to make your stitch width a little bit larger than you would traditionally to make sure that you don't have it tear on you. So now we're going to line this up, and we're just going to do a nice top stitch along the edge. My stitch length is at about a 3.5. Not too crazy wide, but like I said, just a little wider than you would normally. For me, I'm usually at like a 2.5. So now we're just going to take our time, roll that around, and stitch. And I just kind of stop every once in a while to make sure that the fabric is still laying nicely. And I'm getting a nice finished edge. You really just need to take your time because the vinyl is a little bit trickier to sew with, but you can see how quickly that works and it looks nice. So now we can just take this over to our cutting mat and we can just trim off the ends even with our vinyl. So I can just line this up right with the edge of my vinyl. I know it's probably hard for you to see, but I can see it right there along the edge of my ruler, and just cut off that little bit of excess, flip it around, and do the same on the other side. There we go. All right, so now the pocket is complete and we can set that aside for a minute. So now next up, we're going to take our rectangles of fusible fleece and our rectangles of whatever accent fabric we chose. And remember, these should be cut to the exact same size, that 9 by 18 inches. And so we're just going to go ahead and take one of those and we're going to press it so that it fuses to this fusible fleece. And so if you have a print fabric, you're going to want to make sure that you put the wrong sides to the fleece. So I'm going to put this down on my pressing mat, and I can feel the bumpy side of this, the adhesive side, is up towards me. And I'm going to line up what would be the wrong side of my fabric with solids. There's not really a right or wrong side. And you would do this for both sides of your bag. You're going to fuse one side. So just follow the manufacturer's instructions. I've just got a nice hot iron. And make sure it fuses all the way across. There we go. Nice and smooth. And so now this is attached and it acts as a stabilizer and just gives a little bit more body to the bag itself. So one thing you can keep in mind here, if you wanted to add quilting or any type of decorative stitching, maybe applique a name on here, you could do that at this point. The options are really kind of endless, but we're just going to keep it plain just like this to show you how simple it can truly be. So now we're going to sandwich our pieces together. Kind of got a bunch of pieces here, but let me show you. I've gone ahead, here's my other side that I fused together. So this piece is already fused to the vinyl. And then we're going to actually switch this up just a little bit. So you can see here, I'm using those Wonder Clips as opposed to pins, because we don't want to pierce through the vinyl with our pins. And so now what I can do is I can line my pocket up right in the middle. I want to make sure that finished edge is facing down toward the fabric that I am working on, the right sides of the fabric. So I'm looking at the wrong side of the pocket. And I'm just going to use my little ruler here and make sure that this is nice and centered. So I've got about 5 inches on that side and 5 inches on that side, which is what I'm looking for. And so now we're actually also going to take our strap, and that's going to go right underneath the vinyl. And I'm going to go ahead and put a clip there. You can see it's about halfway over the edge of the vinyl. And then I'm going to make sure this isn't twisted. And it's going to lay really nice. And we're going to do the same thing on the other side. And then we can put another clip there to hold that for now. So now we can put our vinyl in here again. And make sure the edges are lined up. And last but not least, we're going to have our other piece of fabric. And this is how we're going to sandwich all of this together. So you are working with quite a few layers here, but the reason we're doing this is by sewing all of this together, it's going to put all of those raw edges inside so that they're not exposed. And it's also going to add some great strength to our handles because it's stitched into that main seam. So I'm going to add a few more clips here just to prevent this from shifting around, because that's the biggest hurdle when we're working with something like vinyl. It just makes things a little bit more slick. All right, there we go. So I have that all pinned together and I've made this one big sandwich. And now we're going to take a generous 1/4 inch seam here. So I'm just going to start. And the real trick to this, like before when we were working on the pocket, is to just take your time. And you're not working with the vinyl against either the feed dogs or the presser foot because we've got it sandwiched between that fabric. So I'm just going to start sewing, move this clip out of the way. Just take my time. You will notice that as you sew, the fabric is going to shift a little bit. And I think it's just from, you know, how slick that vinyl is. It's just naturally going to happen. And so we're just going to try and prevent that as much as possible. You can see I'm guiding the fabric here to keep it from pivoting, but I'm not pulling. You don't want to be pulling it under the machine. Okay, so I'm approaching where my other strap would be here. So let's just check and make sure I have it all where I want it. It's all still lined up. Because when we're dealing with this many layers, it's not hard for that to just slip out of there. So now we're going to sew across. Make sure everything's staying lined up to the best of our abilities and just finish out this edge. There we go. All right, so you can see now that we open this up how this is going to work. When this folds down, all of those raw edges are now tucked inside this. And so this all folds back and it lays exactly how we want it. So again, we're not going to press with the iron here. So let's move some of this out of the way and I'll show you how I do this. I start with just one layer and I just kind of pull against the fabric just to give myself a nice clean edge there, and then I can fold down the other layer of fabric. You can see here, this end, I did get some shifting, which I was prepared for, and so we're just going to take this over to the cutting mat just like we did with our pocket, and we can straighten this up, because otherwise this looks really nice, and I'm very, very happy with it. So let's just use our ruler and true up this edge here. Perfect, just like that. And so now we can just add a nice top stitch to add an extra layer of strength to those handles that we stitched in and to just make everything lay nice and flat. So let's turn this. I'm actually going to turn it this way so I have a little bit less bulk under my machine and I can move my clips for now. And then we're just going to add a nice layer of top stitching. This is one of those points where you can pull your back fabric and make sure everything's laying nice and straight. And then we're just going to sew straight across there. Be patient with your machine as you're working through all those layers. There we go. I think that looks really nice. And so now we can go ahead and come back and stitch down our handles so that those aren't flopping around. And so I'm just going to start here near the bottom And I'm just going to use the width of my presser foot to make a nice long rectangle to come up to right where the pocket ends. And so we'll attach the handle all the way along there. So I'm going to back stitch a few stitches. And I'm going to stop with my needle down and pivot. And come back down to the other side. Now again, I'm using white thread so that you guys can see here, but if you used a coordinating thread, this would just disappear completely and you wouldn't even see it. Okay, and then pivot across the bottom and back stitch. There we go. So that first one is sewn down. Let's go ahead and do the other one, and then I'll meet you back here when it's done. Okay, so then we have that side done, and once we finish that side, the opposite side is made the exact same way, only without the pocket. And so you can see I have that done here. I've got my straps sewn down, and now we can lay these right sides together, and we're going to sew in a big U shape. And again, you can use pins down on the bottom portion where you don't have vinyl, but you can use your Wonder Clips here at the top to hold my edges together. And I just do a little bit at a time just to get me started. And we're going to sew all the way down this side, across the bottom, and up the other side. I do use probably about a 3/8 inch seam allowance here just to make sure I have caught everything, since I'm dealing with all these layers down here at the bottom and I've got this thick side seam. So we're just going to make sure we're taking a nice generous seam, not quite a 1/2 inch. And I am going to back stitch a couple times at the beginning. And on this vinyl part, you really just have to take your time because the feed dogs don't love to work with it, so just go nice and slow. And you can see as long as I'm not speeding, this works beautifully. Because I'm taking a wider seam allowance, I don't have to worry about the fact that the fabric has shifted a little bit down here. I'm going to catch all of that in the end. And I actually like to go ahead and sew all the way off that end, and then I'm going to flip this around and go down the other side, just so I can make sure my top edges and where the base of my bag meet are lined up exactly where I want them. Again, about a 3/8 inch seam allowance. There we go, and now I can go and sew straight across the bottom of this bag. Okay. So now our bag is all sewn together. So let's go ahead and box these corners so that our bag will stand up on its own. We'll take it over here to the cutting board so I can show you what I mean by that. I'm going to pinch this so that the two seams of my bag are lined up. And then I'm going to kind of get this as flat as I can, and I'm going to grab a pin or a marking tool You're not going to see this since it's in the inside of the bag, so you can really use whatever you'd like. And then I am going to use my ruler, and any ruler will work, but I'm going to measure down on that center seam 3 inches, which should mean that if I count across here, I'm going to have 6 inches on my base. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's exactly right. And I can just make sure that this ends on those 2 whole inch marks, and I'm going to draw a line straight across my fabric here. And that line that I'm drawing is where I'm going to want to sew. So there we go. You can see I've just drawn that line there. I'm going to go ahead. You can put a pin or just some Wonder clips to keep that folded the way that you want. And now we're going to stitch right on that line that we drew. Make sure it's not bunching. Everything is nice and smooth under the machine, and back stitch at the beginning. So straight across and back stitch at the end. And you can see by doing that, that's going to create the box at the base of our bag. That's going to give us the shape that we need. So let me show you here on this finished bag, because you're just going to repeat that exact same thing on the other side. And then you can trim off the bulk. You do want to be careful when you're turning your vinyl, because it will kind of crease as you use it. But here you can see my boxed corners inside of my bag. Now, one thing you could do from this point, you can see I went ahead and used that binding edge just like we did on the pocket in the exact same way to bind all the way across the top edge. So you follow the exact same method to go all the way around and close off your edge. You can even add that binding to the inside edge so you don't have any raw edges at all inside, which is a great option. I also couldn't resist. I wanted to show you one more time all of the great colors that this strapping comes in. I've got a navy, a purple, and a red here, but I thought, how cool would this bag look in a print? And so I wanted to show you this great print from Tula's Daydreamer collection. I loved these butterflies, and she has all of these great webbing options available now. So check out the bag that I made using this fabric. Isn't that so cute? I just think this is such a great project, and if you are heading to an event, a sporting event, concert, anything like that, it's perfect for you to take with you and make passing through security a breeze. So I hope you guys enjoyed this project, and until next time, have a great week.